Welcome to From Here to Eternity, a Gateway Seminary podcast about the nations. My name is Phil Hopkins. I'm the host. I'm professor of missions at Gateway Seminary. I've been here for a few years until recently, for about 20 years or so, I lived overseas. In this podcast, we address topics related to the cross-cultural spread of the gospel from here in California, across the U.S., and throughout the world. In these podcasts, these next couple podcasts are from the Evangelical Missiological Society. We had a meeting at Gateway Seminary on April 4th of 2025, the Southwest Regional Meeting, where we talked about topics related to ecclesiology and mission. And there were a number of people who presented, and in their presentations, we were able to record some of those. So we have a few of those here that have been recorded. Most of them are of pretty good quality. There are some that maybe are not so much, but we want to include those in this podcast segment. So there'll be a number of them that'll be spread out, talking from people from various backgrounds throughout the West Coast. Largely throughout the West Coast, from people from Fuller Seminary, from Cal Baptist, from Biola, from other different types of ministry organizations that are talking about ecclesiology and mission. So please enjoy. You'll see a number of different presentations that vary in length and that are quite unique to the people who, just as unique as the people who are presenting them. So we're thankful for those people. We're thankful that they have given us permission to record them, and we hope you all enjoy these podcasts, these presentations of these people. So enjoy, and please contact me with any questions if you have any. Thank you.
I'm Ken Nehrbass. I'm the president of the Evangelical Missiological Society, and also one of the 3 editors of the book that will come out of this project this year. We don't know what's going to be in the book yet. And it depends on what you present here and what people present at the other 6 regional conferences, and then what comes out at national, and then we'll look for the 10 to 15 presentations that make a book on the church and mission, ecclesiology and missions. So because of that, Eunice Hong at Wheaton University and I, we both got grants from our universities to fly around the country and go to multicultural churches. Wow. And then to study what is your experience like at these churches. The number one thing I want to know is, what do you get out of it? Like, imagine, okay, I haven't gone to this church yet, but on May 4th, I'll be going to Village Church in Beaverton, Oregon. And there, people come to one service that's in Korean, English, and Spanish. And so they sing songs that they don't know the language of. They see the script up on the screen, and then they hear preaching today in Spanish, next Sunday in English, next Sunday in Korean. And so the leadership styles represent these 3 backgrounds. The budget is shared. That's a very different model than the church I pastored for 7 years in Southern California, where it was an Anglo congregation, but we kind of rented out the space to a Vietnamese congregation and rented it out to a Spanish congregation. And very different than the congregation that I'm at now in Riverside, where there's a very ethno-diverse service, but it's one language, one leadership style. But we happen to have a shared budget and shared brand with a Spanish congregation that meets on the campus. They're not a separate, it's like, and their kids are sharing the same children's service. So I began to see different models. And I wondered, what are people's experiences like at these churches? So this is the study that we're working on this year. We're about halfway through, so we don't have all of our findings yet, but we have we have some here today. So, the methodology, we have 32 participants and 18 pastors that we're talking to, 18 staff members, and 10 churches that we're going to. So you'll see that there are different kinds of multicultural churches that we've come across. Now, when we began pitching this idea to people, they said, well, I think my church qualifies, but what do you mean by multicultural? Well, we started with Michael Emerson's. He's kind of the guru of, at least of multi-ethnic churches. 80%, no ethnic group can represent more than 80% of the congregation. Well, we realized that's only one factor. That's even only one factor of ethnodiversity. Because other authors and other churches have said, well, it's really important about ethnic diversity on the stage, or ethnic diversity among the leadership. The leadership. Well, what do you mean by leadership? Paid leadership, or just pastoral leadership, and then ethnic diversity in the imagery on this around the campus. But we realized that ethnic diversity was only one of many things that people experience in multicultural churches. Multiple languages, multiple worship styles. So we ended up, we wanted to go to different kinds of churches where people experience multicultural or multi-ethnic differently, and see, okay, how does this church seem to be different from this one? And so we try to avoid the term race. We can't really avoid it entirely because racial relations, we don't really talk about ethnic relations. I mean, it doesn't come up in the literature as much, so talk about interracial relations. But for the most part, when we talk about physical differences, you can look at and say, that person seems to come from a different ancestral background than I do. We're using the term ethnicity, multi-ethnic congregations. Now, there are books out there that say multicultural congregations, what they meant was multi-ethnic. But we are saying multi-ethnic means more than one ethnicity, and ethnicity we mean basically the physical characteristics or the markers. Now, we know that also comes along with probably, at least in your background, you have different languages, different cultural patterns. But we needed something to describe the people seem to be from different backgrounds. And then multicultural means you bring that background with you, like it's represented. Different languages in church, different foods in church, different worship styles, different communication styles and such. And so that's what we meant by multicultural. Monocultural? We don't think it really, monoethnic we don't think exists, right? Go to everybody, you do the 23andMe, and it's going to tell you you're a different ethnicity, you're different than the person next to you, even if they look like you. So we would go kind of with Michael Emerson's definition there, though, that a church that is 80% people who seem to more or less be of the same ethnic background, that would be a monocultural church. We're not saying it's 100% everybody is the same. We're just saying that it doesn't meet the qualifications of this ethnically diverse church. All right, so here were the 5 factors that we saw as, we call them motives, because we're actually spelling, I'll show you how the spelling works, but multiculturality, oneness, togetherness, inclusionary vision, and ethnic diversity, motives, is how we're now understanding the factors that describe the different types of churches. Why was the church that I pastored that rented its congregation, how is that different than the one where everybody's singing in different languages together and worshiping together? So I'll go through those 5. Multiculturality. This is the least common marker. Do you actually have more than one language of worship song on Sunday? And I asked our pastor of our mega church in Riverside, he's like, why would we do that? He said, I have a hard enough time just following church in English, let alone add another language to it. So that vision for him, like, he's not going to capture that vision. Now, the church has multiculturality in the sense that we have a Spanish service going on at the same time. It's just not together. So we notice togetherness is another marker, and I'll get to that in a minute. The leadership styles represent more than one background. Well, at our church, okay, this Fabian, the pastor from Colombia, he is on staff. He's speaking about what the sermons will look like. He's speaking to those who handle the branding of the church. So we have at least 2 different worship styles, or 2 different leadership styles being represented here. Sermons are delivered in more than one language. Only in the sense at our church, the fact that they're having simultaneously in different rooms. Okay, the worship service represents more than one cultural background. Not particularly in our, like in the Anglo service or in the Spanish service, but if you see that the church has multiculturality across the campus, yes. So that's why we needed something to mark togetherness as well. All right, so you get multiculturality. There are other markers. Are there events throughout the week, throughout the year that represent different cultural backgrounds? Like the church I pastored, we had Tet Festival was part of our church, even though it was an Anglican congregation. We were renting the congregation out to a Vietnamese congregation. It was in a Vietnamese area, and so we had Tet Festival and decorated the congregation. Decorated the sanctuary. The Vietnamese congregation decorated the sanctuary. So those are markers of multiculturality. Now, oneness then was important because this shared space. There's not oneness of budget. There's not one leadership team. It's like not even one brand, right? Like the church where we were renting out our space, SEMA was a different brand, different name for the congregation, different denomination. They were Pentecostal. We were just renting the space. So there wasn't oneness, but there was multiculturality in the sense that, not a lot, but like there would be some markers around the congregation of different people, different cultures worship here in this space. And one vision, has one vision shared, and these are the kind of interview questions. Well, why is that important? Why do you need one vision? I was asking, why one vision when it's a different congregation in a way? They're speaking a different language, and the senior pastor said to me, every ministry we have is this vision. Like a children's ministry has to have the same, everything we do has to have the same vision. So some leaders think that way. They are so driven by their vision that if it's happening on our campus, it's our vision. So that's important to some. And to some of these pastors of the, I'll call them guest congregation, like maybe have a host in a guest congregation, or like the sponsored congregation, the oneness is important. We're not doing our own thing. Even though we're separate, it's one budget. Now that got really sticky. A number of the, let's say, ethnic congregations that were being hosted by an Anglo congregation. We don't like this one budget thing. Believe it or not, it's the guest congregation saying, because we think we're bringing in more money than they are allocating to us for staff, for resources. Like we're over here in this gymnasium. We think we represent more of this budget than's being represented. So that gets sick. And so to really work this out, the church has to have kind of the transition plan. What is your long-term goal here? The Spanish congregation is at our church. Their long-term goal is to be the largest, most impactful church, Spanish-speaking church in the Inland Empire. So they don't want to be in a gymnasium sharing this is temporary. They want to become the Spanish-speaking church in Riverside and San Bernardino County. So there will be a transition of this oneness, probably no longer. This will be basically a divorce plan, I think, in there. A succession plan or something. So that's oneness. To think that togetherness is different than oneness. So you can have a shared leadership team, shared budget, shared vision, shared brand, and not be together. And that's the church we're at now. That's it. Everything's the Grove. Everyone's on the same staff, same budget, but they're not together. So now this congregation I mentioned up in Oregon, they have high togetherness, high multiculturality, and high oneness. But the church we're at here in Riverside, high multiculturality, high oneness, low togetherness. The church that I pastored in Fountain Valley, high multiculturality, low oneness, low togetherness. Different budgets, different staff, so it's low oneness. Different togetherness, different worship times. But high multiculturality. Vietnamese congregation on campus, Spanish congregation. Actually, there's a Khmer congregation now, and a Korean congregation and English. So 5 different cultures showing up on Sundays. All right, inclusionary vision. So this is basically the level of intentionality. And the reason this is important is some of the churches in our study, like in Center Point and Colton, highly ethnic diverse, represents the ethnic diversity of the city of Colton. So it's like 65% Anglo, or I don't know, maybe it's under 50% Anglo. Very Hispanic area as well, some Asian Americans. So very ethnically diverse, but no one wants to talk about it. There's no programming related to ethnic inclusion. There's nothing in the vision about it. When I interviewed people, they're like, I'm colorblind. And it's not just the Anglos. Like everyone's like, why would I want the pastor talking about race? That divides us. So there was this shared culture of we don't think of the music as white music. We don't think of the preaching style as white preaching style. We're Christians. And that's what you get, even if it was Latino or Asian participants in the church. Like, it's Christian music. They were very colorblind about it. That's not true with some of the other churches we visited. Eunice and I both gone to churches in the South where the colorblind does not describe the church approach. It's like, we are working on ethnic reconciliation. It's part of our plans. We're marching. We're demonstrating. We're going through books on racism as a church. We deliberately make our small groups. They have to be integrated. Yeah. Okay, that's a very different approach than the center point. And so, inclusionary vision is the degree to which this happens on purpose. All right. Then, ethnic diversity. This is probably the most obvious one that when we talk to people about the study, that's what they thought we were probably doing. So that's like the Michael Emerson rule of 80% of the stage is diverse, or, no more than 80% of any single ethnic group up on stage or on the leadership team or in the pews. And the reason for the 80% was the likelihood that when you show up on Sunday or when you're in a small group, it's going to be with someone from a different ethnic background. Okay, here's the quantitative measure of our study. Would you all do this for me? We're going to measure your multiculturality, oneness, togetherness, inclusionary vision, and ethnodiversity at your church.
Can you utilize that?
Yeah. A couple of things we want to do with this quantitative part. We're using you to see the reliability analysis and also the validity, because the more people who go to the same church and rate their church the same way, that shows face validity of the instrument. And then the more that, we're running various tests on the quantitative instrument to make sure that it's a good instrument. So if you had high intentionality, high inclusionary vision, then you would have scored advocate church, and I'll go through that in a minute. Okay. Yeah. It is some of the monocultural churches we visited were advocate church, and I'll get to. Anyone else get a posture yet? There's other types of monocultural churches. Now, I pastored a monocultural church in Elwood, Indiana. The town was 100% white. Now, why was it? It was a KKK town. So they had, they could be an advocate church, but they would likely never become really a multi-ethnic church. But they had some, to really redeem that aspect, they would need to really be, they have to be involved in some sort of advocacy. Now, that's not true of all monoethnic churches, and in our book we describe other monoethnic churches that are trying very hard, or that it's just like, you live in a town that's not ethnically diverse, it's going to be, that's one of the factors that contributes to it.
Mine is hybrid posture.
Hybrid, okay. So, what do you think?
Well, there's a few things that were hard because there might be ethnic diversity within a congregation, but language diversity. So somebody might have a posture culturally, but still operate in the majority language.
Yeah.
And so in our church, there's the majority of language is separated a few times a month, but then occasionally we come out together. So there's some of that that's in there.
Right.
That I couldn't answer fully.
Yeah, that's it. The last church that I visited in South Carolina, it was hard to decide because, really they were moving from one posture to another. And they weren't agreed. Some people were like, we are ethnically diverse. Some weren't agreed. We are intentional. Some were like, we wouldn't have enough intentionality. We do show, like I heard a Spanish praise song playing when I walked in, but that was the only marker of multilingualism that I noticed in the church. And yet there was a Spanish-speaking family in front of me. So yeah, there's some amount of hybridity here. Now, if most people's scores are coming out hybrid, our model's not working. We need a lot of churches to fit these other models to really feel like the quantitative instrument works anyway. I'll ask you in a few minutes what else you have, but you'll see how these 5 factors overlap. It's a very complex. I'm not sure this would show up in our book. Because it's very complex, but you can see, for instance, a church that is a shared space posture like they're renting out their space. There's multiculturality, but there's not an inclusionary vision. There's not oneness of budget and leadership. There's not even, interestingly, ethnic diversity, because everyone in the Spanish congregation is that's difficult, because like a Spanish congregation, you're going to have people from all over the Caribbean and South America, but there may not be ethnic diversity in the Anglo congregation. Okay, this is the one that I described first. This is the posture in Oregon at Village Church. It has multiculturality, inclusionary vision, oneness, togetherness, and ethnic diversity. So it's right in the center. Now, we don't think that is the vision for every church. I'm not saying that's the biblical vision. I'm not saying it's the one that fits your context, calling, and constituency. But that happens to be all 5 values, or all 5 motives. The Reconciling Posture has various ethnicities worshiping together. It's intentional about it. What it actually lacks is the multiculturality. See that it's outside of that overlapping. And then here, monoethnic down here has togetherness and oneness. Not necessarily, though. There's not necessarily togetherness. Can you think of a monoethnic church that does not have togetherness? That's the multi-site congregation. So the one key has to have oneness without multiculturality. All right, that's how the overlapping visions work. We have a flow chart here for you to determine, okay, which of these are you? And this is the logic that's behind the qualtrics that you just took. So oneness, do you have togetherness? Do you have ethnic diversity? Do you have inclusionary vision and multiculturality? Then you're a culture blending. That was right at the center of all 5. And maybe you have oneness. If you don't have oneness, you have a shared space posture. We don't have we're just renting space. All right, I'll go through some of these, what we mean by these terms. Monoethnic, I have an example here from Seoul, Korea. They have oneness and togetherness, but not multiculturality, not diversity. All right. The shared space posture, here's an interesting one. You can see they've got a Korean congregation, a Spanish congregation, a deaf congregation, a deaf church meeting at 11. But they're sharing space. There's not a shared vision. There's not intentionality. There's not multiculturality, because the only thing they have is multiculturality, but not oneness in budget, not oneness in leadership, not oneness in brand. Then the advocate posture is a church that wants to be ethnically diverse, or that has an inclusionary vision, but that has not actually achieved that yet. So they have the oneness, they have the intentionality, the togetherness, but not the ethnic diversity. And a multi-ethnic posture has the ethnic diversity and the oneness and togetherness. We actually have found churches, only one in a suburb of Illinois, Anglo and Black church meeting separately, same brand, same pastoral leadership. That seems, what? I couldn't believe it. But the story behind it is actually not very scandalous. It's actually pretty cool. It was a white church and black church that is trying to come together, and they just haven't quite bridged like they said, we want to be together. We are not ready to make that step to have the same worship time, and so anyway, they're working toward it. The language group posture is more common in areas like Southern California, where there's a lot of first generation. This is the first gen church and the difference between this church and the multi-ethnic church. The multi-ethnic church has a lot of second gen and third gen people. Like, I don't speak Korean. I'm Korean. I don't speak Korean. I'm not going to the Korean church. That was for my parents or my grandparents. And so it's a multi-ethnic church, but not a language posture. And the language group posture says, we're going to have an English service, we're going to have a Spanish service, a Korean service, but it's one brand, one leadership team. So there's oneness, multiculturality, but not togetherness. And the Reconciling is like the Advocate Church, but has achieved ethnic diversity. So we found a few of those, like Bridgeway in Maryland and Transformation Church in South Carolina. And then the culture blending is this most fascinating one, like Clarkston, Georgia, and First Baptist Duluth, Georgia. and Village Church in Oregon, where you have all 5 motives, diversity, multiculturality, oneness, intentionality, and togetherness. So it's multiple languages all together, multiple leadership styles. Okay, we just have a couple minutes for responses.
If you look at the factor of a lot of the churches that come in there, they can have any intention they want, but their children are largely going off and blending elsewhere.
Yeah.
And then you go to some of these churches and you look around, it's all old people, for example. There's a lot of Chinese congregations down here that are kind of like that.
Yeah.
So that's a different factor, is what is their intention? Are they going to try to keep where they are?
Yeah.
So are you looking at that? Or?
Yeah. That's part of why we kind of want to give permission to churches. You need to look at your constituency and say, does it make sense for you to have just a Chinese language service? Does it make sense for you to have a language group where there's no longer togetherness, you're giving that up, but you have an English service? So there's kind of a introspection of what of these 5 motives do we need to leverage more? Are we okay with moving into a different one of these models? But Eunice's dissertation was on that with the Korean church, basically why second gens Koreans don't feel at home in their parents' churches.
In your study, have you seen how have these churches overcome resistance to change, and have you measured that?
No. That other books have tried to do that.
Yeah.
How did they? And by fiat, like the one in Duluth, the story of Duluth, Georgia, the pastor was like, "We're going here. You're getting on the train, or you're not." And he just said, and he lost half his congregation, and then lo and behold, the congregation was all immigrants from around the world because he made them feel welcome.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had to really limit our one research question to what is your experience in this church? Yeah.
So Ken, I was curious, you mentioned the colorblind earlier, and the different ethnic groups saying, kind of having that colorblind posture. I was wondering, did you notice where a lot of those second, third gen
yes.
that posture?
Yes, they didn't speak, like Latinos who didn't speak Spanish, and right, I didn't, and they were all young. The whole church was young, Yeah, all right, thanks.